You're listening to Worlds Beyond with Cam and Ron.
Yeah, it seems like we're getting some more though. Like I saw, the director of Shang-Chi is on board to direct the Kang Dynasty. I saw.
Oh, really?
I just saw that maybe like an hour ago or so.
When was that slated to be released?
Not until 2025. That's the next Avengers movie.
So there was a whole bunch of stuff at Comic-Con this weekend. Did I show you the Black Panther trailer?
Yes.
And we watched the She-Hulk trailer too.
Yeah, that was awesome.
I can't wait for that. That's only 2 weeks away.
We love her, the actress.
Yeah.
She was amazing in Orphan Black.
But yeah, let's get right into it. So Stranger Things was highly and hotly anticipated, finally coming back after being delayed by the pandemic. Everyone was worried about the kids aging up so much over the intervening years. I thought it worked. I thought for the most part they looked fine with a couple of exceptions.
Yeah, for the most part.
What was the story going to be? Where were they going to take it? And we knew this was going to be a much bigger, more epic season in that the episodes were going to be longer. So we got 9 episodes, which I think is more. I think the average season has been 8 episodes. So we got one more episode than we normally get. And all the episodes were at least an hour long within the 2 second part closing episodes being 90 minutes and then I think over 2 hours. So really epic scale. And I'll say in terms of opening up with initial reactions, I loved it. Didn't feel at all like 9 really long episodes to me, because definitely there have been times in previous seasons when there was here's the sort of slow transitional episode or the dead spot. I didn't feel that at all this season. So that's my initial reaction. What about you, Jen?
I agree. Absolutely loved it. I think they had so many subplots kind of going on at the same time, like different groups of, the cast doing different things, that it all just kind of came together. And it was just so exciting to move on to the next, group to check in and see what they were up to. And it went by so quickly. I could have watched 5 more episodes at least. It was so good.
Yeah, I loved season 4, and we haven't talked about Stranger Things a whole lot on this series yet, so I love the whole series. I think season 4 was a continuation of the high quality that we've seen throughout the years. Although I will say I don't think they'll ever be able to recreate the magic of season 1. I thought that season in particular just really hit all those perfect cinematic notes, and it stands alone on its own. But then seasons 2 and especially 3, I thought 3 was really good. And then this season have been just really great follow-ups that kind of build on what they set up in season 1. And kind of on that note, I was really impressed with how much of season 4's plot they managed to actually tie back into the first season and kind of bring it all back together and make it feel a little bit more cohesive. But on the other hand, I also felt like a lot of the stuff they were introducing really, there was no way for them to have known because they've been developing it as they go along, but I kind of felt like, I really wish that we had been seeing hints of some of this stuff in the previous seasons to kind of make it feel a little bit less abrupt. But yeah, overall it worked, and I'm just really impressed that they're still managing to create such great content after all these years. And just to get the conversation started, my favorite episodes were 4, 8, and 9, and then I actually felt that episodes 5 and 7 were kind of that low point for the series for me, where it just kind of felt like, all right, can we just get onto it? Because there was so much going on and most of it worked, but 5 and 7 I felt were most focused on the group that was in California with Jonathan and Mike and Argyle, and I was like kind of the least interested in those characters, and I thought those were the most heavy of the episodes that featured those characters. But other than that, I loved it.
Yeah, right. Well, on that theme, the one thing I will say is there was, with the divergent plots, the very divergent plots, this season more than any, they had obviously things going on in several different places. And the one thing I thought that contributed to was, some different characters got the spotlight that haven't gotten the spotlight previously from the central cast, as well as obviously several characters that haven't been in the spotlight before or are new to the series got spotlighted quite a bit. And it was interesting to see who didn't get a whole lot of airtime this season. For instance, Jonathan didn't get a lot of airtime. Even Mike didn't get a lot of airtime. And I'll apologize right now. I think Millie Bobby Brown is the only actress's name I know off the top of my head, so I'm just gonna stick with character names.
I love the new characters they introduced. I mean, we can get into that a little bit more, but one character that I felt was completely unnecessary to the entire plot, Argyle. They didn't need to introduce him. I mean, Jonathan could have been the pizza delivery guy, and they could have carried on without having him. I thought he did nothing for the show. There was no purpose in having him. I know he tried to lighten the mood a little bit here and there, but as far as furthering the plot along and the storyline, and not necessary.
Yeah, that's something we talked about before, is his character. His character being so prominent, it gave you the goofy high surfer guy comedy element, 80, and that's definitely an 80s trope. The stoner guy, the Jeff Spicoli guy. We thought, as we were talking about it, that that might have been a missed opportunity where, while he couldn't have played that sort of slapstick stoner guy, it might have been if Jonathan had that. If he was driving the van, if he did all the stuff at the pizza shop, maybe he might have gotten more screen time that way instead of, introducing this new character. I laughed a couple of times, but he was definitely superfluous. And then, Jen, I know you have a lot to say about the fantastic new character that was added in that we all loved and are sad that he got killed off.
Eddie Munson, rest in peace. Amazing character. From the moment he stepped on screen, his character was so dynamic. He was funny and a little kooky and showed a sweet side, when he was talking with the cheerleader, and all around just an excellent character. Loved the dynamic between him and Dustin the whole time. A little jealousy from Steve.
Right, yeah, that was great.
And just how he seemed on edge of being this crazy kind of over-the-top bully, but then he never quite got there, and instead he always made the turn to being kind of like a like you said, a sweet, more humble guy, whatever the case may be. His character was fantastic, and as well, I don't even remember her character name, but the cheerleader, she was actually great. And I know that there's been a lot of talk online about how they had such good chemistry in that one little scene they had together at the picnic table. But I think it made it actually work better because you really felt the loss, and that she was the first person to get killed off. So the fact that they did have that scene and you did like her so much, made the fact that she got killed off that much more impactful.
Yeah, that reminds me of kind of the first element that I was really happy they touched on, which was the kind of like panic against D&D and it being like a Satanist thing. And specifically with the Eddie Munson character, I love that they gave you just enough to make you kind of understand why he was an outcast and why so many people kind of thought of him as this, like he could be a murderer. He might have actually murdered this cheerleader girl, but then you see the other side of him that all the main characters see, which is he's nice and he's just a goofball and he just comes from kind of a rough background. But that reminded me of a lot of the kids who got kind of falsely accused of murder and all these other heinous crimes just because they liked heavy metal and D&D and that sort of thing that happened in the 80s and 90s. There were a couple kind of high-profile cases where the people who were convicted have since gotten acquitted because it was all kind of moral panic and not actual evidence. But they really played into that at the end, especially where the whole town is kind of against Eddie, and that pissed me off because I feel like, I was kind of pissed off overall because I feel like they introduced him and they really didn't need to kill him off in the 9th episode. Like, I feel like he could have just jumped out of the Upside Down with Dustin and they could have written off the crazy bat things and they would have been okay. So it really felt like kind of a cheap move to just kill him right after introducing him, especially because he was clearly going to be the character that everybody fell in love with. Like, I almost, as much as I love all the main characters, if they were gonna have to kill somebody, I almost would have rather it been one of the main characters, just because like that would have been an actual ballsy move as opposed to just introducing this character and then kind of manipulating our feelings and killing him off in a manner that he's not going to be able to, or he might not be able to like redeem himself and people are still going to think of him as a murderer. So I thought that was kind of a cheap move, and I really wish that they, even if it kind of lowered the stakes a little bit and made it a little bit unbelievable that nobody has died in all of this carnage, like I would have rather have seen his character move on to the last season. But I mean, I get it. They had to have some big death in order to raise the stakes and have a big dramatic moment.
Although, Cam, think about it. Dr. Brenner came back. You never know.
Actually,
Maybe
I'm
there's
glad
a
you
chance.
mentioned that, because that was probably one of my only big issues with this season is I feel like he didn't really need to come back except for the flashbacks. Like, he didn't need to have survived season 1, and that cheapens the end of season 1 where he apparently dies. And I just didn't feel like his presence in the modern day story was really needed. I know they needed that foil to the more like friendly scientist guy that Elle likes, but I felt like they could have maybe brought in an assistant of his or something else and kept him to the flashbacks.
Yeah, well, I mean, Paul Reiser, he was too nice to have
Right.
played that. I thought, I mean, I guess thinking back, you didn't actually see him die in the first, so I mean, but it was obviously totally implied, and I don't think they had any intention of bringing him back at that point. And it was, one of the things that was kind of odd was just how Paul Reiser comes in. You think he's going to play this big role with Elle and getting her back on track, and then as soon as they brought, and you almost wondered, was that the original plan? And then they said, oh no, let's bring Matthew Modine back because that'll freak everybody out, and he's so much more of a sinister character. Because once they got to the lab, Paul Reiser kind of was an afterthought from that point on.
Yeah, I mean, I thought it worked, and they needed that kind of villain to continue the relationship from the flashbacks and kind of flesh out the backstory a little bit with one and everything else. But I just felt that was a little bit of a cheap move, especially alongside killing Eddie.
Exactly, and like Steve, and especially I thought Eddie was going to survive because Steve got pretty like chewed up by the
right, yeah.
He still made
it.
Steve.
I thought Steve might die. I still feel like if anyone is going to die in the next season, it will be Steve. But I guess we'll see.
I hope not.
I know. Well, that's the thing. I kind of am like, but does anyone really need to die? But they got to have their dramatic moment.
Right. If anything, I feel like in terms of like rising and falling characters, in terms of how I feel about them, Will just threw me for a loop the entire season. Like, what was he so upset about the entire season? And I'm saying that to be exaggerated. They certainly implied, like, very loudly that is he like struggling with his orientation, and does he have a crush on Mike, and he has to keep it inside. Like, it was so funny that for 9 episodes, where they had plenty of time to sort of flesh out any of these things, they certainly dealt with Robin's orientation and how her crush on that girl in the band. So I mean, just as far as dealing with representation and orientation and all that stuff, it just seemed they had him have these just like emotional kind of fits like off to himself, and never I don't want to say paid it off, but just never said, okay, like, what are you so upset about? Maybe they felt like it didn't need to be said. I mean, but it just left you with that feeling of like, okay, they teased this the whole season with him, and that's pretty much all we got of Will was his just him being like pouty and sad and on the verge of bursting about whatever it is. Obviously, the implication, at least to me and to many people, it seems like that was what he was upset about, but we don't really know. So I just thought that was strange to just put his character in that situation and not give any resolution to it. Plus, oh my God, his haircut. Can we talk about his bowl cut? I was just like, everybody else got a cool new haircut, and
yeah, he still gets stuck with the bowl cut. I mean, that's kind of the ages thing where most of them can still play the ages that they're cast as, I guess. But like, I feel like, Will especially, I feel like they need to update his hairstyle and just his general style overall. I thought it was so funny when Lucas's sister says she's like 11 or something when her actress is clearly like 15, 16, 17. So I thought that was hilarious. I kind of want them to do a time jump for the next season. I kind of doubt they will, given how this one ended, but if they just time jumped maybe 2 years, the older characters would still be believable, and then you could have the characters who were supposed to be a little bit younger in this one kind of aged up, but ultimately it doesn't really matter that much.
It is funny, there wasn't a lot of Dustin. I mean, he had his great moments, but there wasn't a ton of Dustin. There definitely wasn't much Mike. Even Elle, in some ways, I don't want to say she was a secondary character, but she definitely was not in the show a lot for the first block of episodes, and then she had all of her moments most of her moments kind of in the second half, so it was interesting. Max got a lot of screen time. She's become a very popular actress, from Stranger Things, and she did the Fear Street movies.
Right, yeah.
She was excellent in that.
I think she's been in a couple of other things too. So
yeah, I feel like out of all of the kid actors that have been introduced on this show, I think she's probably one of the biggest ones that have come out of Stranger Things. And her character's great too. I really like what they did with her in this season. I thought this was the last season. So in episode 4, when they're kind of hinting that she might die and she's writing the letters to her family and stuff, I was thinking that any of these characters could potentially die. So I was like, oh crap, they might actually do this. So that last sequence when they first introduce, or I don't know if it's when they first introduce running up that hill, but that kind of major sequence when she's running away from Vecna for the first time, I thought that was super suspenseful and really well done. And that song, I've never even heard that song before. You guys might have been familiar with it.
I vaguely remember it.
It's kind of a weird, like not even a very catchy song, but it's like it works for the kind of creepy atmosphere and kind of like hopeful, but not quite. Like the happy ending is still a little bit far away, so it's kind of a weird like in between. So I thought that was a good choice.
And I liked how they highlighted the different styles of music too. How Max's character was into kind of that not
New
a
wave,
mainstream, song that people didn't know. And then towards the end too, when they were going through the trailer trying to find tapes to play, and it was Eddie's music.
Yeah, none of them knew what it was.
They were yelling like, "Where's Madonna? Where's this?" And he's like, "This is music." And it was like, all these
Iron Maiden.
Yeah, like metal bands and hard rock and stuff like that. I thought that was kind of funny. And I liked how they both related to their different characters.
Another point I want to just touch back on that you raised, Cam, is the show has always been, and especially when you're talking about the first season, the show has always been so great in embracing all of the pop culture tropes of the 80s, and that's why season 1 was so successful, because it was just such a love letter to E.T. and Spielberg and Goonies and that whole thing. But this season, where you mentioned the Satanic Panic stuff, this is the first time where I feel like they touched on an actual social issue from, real life social issue from the 80s, which was the backlash against heavy metal and the Satanic Panic about metal and D&D and all that stuff. So that was definitely interesting.
They also really upped the horror on this season. The storyline really grew up very quickly. I found it to be lots of jump scares. I know, Ron, you and I spoke about this a lot, Kim. All the throwback to the 80s horror movies, right, and all of the little nuances that they included, amazing. They did such a great job. We actually had to sit and discuss after every episode what we both picked up on.
Right.
It was really cool.
That brings us to Robert Englund.
Oh, yeah.
Playing Victor Creel there.
Yeah, well, that kind of is a reference. That's what I was going to say, is I'm glad that they finally brought in a sentient villain from the Upside Down to kind of counter these more animalistic monsters that we've had. And I mean, to me, clearly it was a direct reference to Freddy Krueger, so bringing in Robert Englund as that character felt like it was kind of paying homage to the fact that they're kind of doing a Freddy thing, because even though he wasn't like a dream demon, he still came to people in these kind of psychic visions and had a lot of the same mannerisms, like talking to them and threatening them and stuff. He wasn't as goofy as Freddy was, but still a lot of those same kind of things. And then I think even in the Nightmare on Elm Street movies, the people who are awake as the other people are dying in their sleep only see them reacting and not actually. So when people were dying from Vecna's curse, people just saw them floating upwards and getting crushed and nothing else. So I thought that was great. And I really liked just how scary in that performance of, I don't know what the actor's name who played Vecna, but I thought he was great.
We're looking online, Jamie Campbell Bower.
He was fantastic.
Yeah, he was really good, really creepy. And one scene I want to point out, so yeah, there was definitely a lot of Dream Warriors, a lot of Nightmare on Elm Street stuff. One scene I picked out on Cam, I don't know if I told you about this, but I will go back and look at it because it was such a small scene, but it hit me right away. When the evil general there comes to the facility, the lab in the desert, and they come down, and then the Matthew Modine's, Dr. Brenner's troops are lining up to try to hold them off, and they get behind all these things, and then I forget who it is coming down the hallway. To me, it looked like it was a total play on the opening scene of Star Wars Episode 4, the blockade
yeah, I think
runner,
you're right. I do remember
when
that.
they blow open the door and all the stormtroopers come rushing in, and all the other troops are faced off against them. That felt like it was a total homage to that.
Oh yeah, no, I do remember that now you mention it.
So other things, there were so many actors. I mean, we haven't even touched on.
Oh yeah, we haven't even
Ryder,
talked about the
David Harbour,
the Russian plot. Yeah,
Russian subplot.
And Murray, don't forget about Murray.
Yeah, all of that was so good. I don't even think it. Like, I didn't have really any problems with it. I thought it was super intense, and their relationship was great, and how it went kind of back and forth. And I liked how we went from hating that Russian soldier guy to him teaming up and him coming back with them to the U.S. and stuff. I thought that was great.
Yeah, I'm trying to think if there's any other characters to really touch on. The parents had no screen time basically throughout the season.
Yeah, they had a couple of one-liners here and there.
Mike's mom has redeemed herself the past season or two, but I think Mike's dad is probably my least favorite character because he's just so clueless and so just disinterested in everything. Like it's like
I think he was supposed to represent that quintessential 80s like computer programmer dad or something that, I
feel like this season, as great as it was for how many different storylines were going on, I really feel like it might have been the weakest season in terms of storytelling, just because the previous three were a little bit more focused on one kind of through line, and I really liked how season 2 and 3 were a little bit more focused. But I'm kind of hoping that this was kind of their big, everyone's off doing their own thing, almost like Empire Strikes Back. And then season 5, the last season, will be a little bit more focused, and everyone has come back together in Hawkins, and they have to figure out stuff there. And I have a feeling it'll be less of like a epic globe-trotting adventure like this one was.
The way season 3 ended, I think probably at that time, I wonder if they didn't know if they were going to get renewed at that time.
Right,
so
that's what it seemed like to me, yeah.
They definitely left a lot of open threads there, but it was a pretty definitive ending. And I think that's what plays into what you were saying before about how there was no real seeds of how we got to Vecna, laid in the previous seasons. And I think part of the reason for that is they didn't know there was going to be necessarily this season. So kudos to them for coming up with something that they were able to
right. Well, yeah, that's what keeps impressing me about all
I
these
think,
subsequent seasons.
I hope for the final season we get a everybody together, really focused main plot.
Any predictions?
Yeah, I really have no idea, because I was surprised at just how much damage they did to Hawkins at the end. Like are people not noticing that there's a giant portal to hell that has opened up? Like
right.
Like how much do people know and how much is like covered up?
Well, Mike's dad has no idea. I can tell you that.
Right. Well, yeah, that's for sure.
And like in previous seasons, the evil monster, whatever it is, seems to die but doesn't really die. But so does that mean not a lot of bats and creepy crawly things will come out of these holes into the Upside Down, because right now Vecna is sort of defeated, and so people will be able to write it off as just some kind of freak earthquake or something like that? Or I'll be very curious to see where they tie things up, and that'll be one thing that's kind of like they'll never be able to go back to in this final season, that sort of baseline of kind of, it's everyday life,
right,
and we're going to high school and we're doing this. And now things have kind of, I don't want to use the term jump the shark because that's not what I mean by it, but like now we're past anything being just sort of under the guise of sort of this stuff happening, underneath or behind a facade of everyday life. I mean, it's kind of like out there now.
I hope to see a lot of the plot also kind of tied up. I was wondering if they were going to bring back Elle's sister. I forget what number she was. They had that crazy, bizarre episode a couple seasons ago.
Trip,
Oh, was that the episode in season 2 that everyone hated?
Yes. Yeah. So she honed her powers and she got some help. She kind of found her identity and, wasn't feeling alone as she was trying to find a place to call home. I did enjoy like those elements to the story, but it seemed that they introduced another very powerful character. I'm hoping that maybe she'll come back in season 5 and help Elle defeat them. Maybe there's going to be some kind of tie-in.
Well, wasn't there a big deal about her not even being in those flashbacks? Like, shouldn't she have been there in the flashbacks? I almost wonder if that was a totally different thing that they had planned and they have since just dropped it and have decided to write it out,
Oh, possibly. That'll be disappointing.
So much stuff to digest and so much stuff that it's not even possible to go through all the different little moments and things. But overall, I just thought this was better than I expected. I thought I was going to like it, but maybe it's not. Maybe it won't be what previous seasons, especially season 1, were. But I thought they really knocked it out of the park. Final thoughts from either of you guys?
My last prediction, or really my only prediction for next season, is that Dustin is going to become a metalhead and they're going to feature a lot more heavy metal. Or maybe that's just more of a wishful thinking.
Yeah.
I think
I'm down
based
with that.
on his reaction to Eddie and everything, I think he's going to inherit his heavy metal CDs, and I hope that they bring in a little bit more of a metal element, because that's definitely been missing from all the seasons besides this one.
I definitely think he's going to take over for the Hellfire Club. He'll definitely be the president.
Right.
Absolutely.
Yeah, that'll be great.
I have to say, though, I think we need to make a pact that we're going to watch it as soon as it airs.
Yes.
We're not going to look at any spoilers, because unfortunately I saw a lot of things online, on Facebook, on social
I
media
did
before
see
watching
a
it.
few
And it
spoilers,
did, it kind of ruined the surprise of a lot of it. So I say we make a pact, gentlemen, next time. Next season, we're going to either watch it together or watch it immediately when it comes out.
All right. And with that, we're excited for the final season of Stranger Things. And that's a wrap on Stranger Things 4. Next up is The Black Phone, starring Ethan Hawke and a bunch of other people, and directed by Scott Derrickson. And Cam, your initial reaction?
Well, we've been seeing the trailer for this movie for months and months and months. It was supposed to come out, I almost want to say, a year ago.
Oh, wow.
And they kept pushing it back. And I'm not sure if they were retooling the movie or maybe it was testing really well, so they just kept pushing it to a better date. But after this long wait, I was really pleasantly surprised by it. I loved it for its kind of really grim tone. I thought that was really effective in this kind of feeling of hopelessness and dread all the way through. And I really enjoyed the main character, Finney. I thought he was really sympathetic, and the problem he was in just felt like so, I guess I just have to say hopeless again. But it had this really great, like, cathartic ending that I don't want to say tied everything together, because it didn't in a lot of ways, but it just I think it came together really well at the end.
Overall, I would say I had a very mixed reaction to it. I did like I thought that the resolution was emotionally satisfying. There were just lots of things that we'll get into as we talk in more detail. But overall, I had a very kind of mixed reaction to it, and I through the whole movie I was like questioning. Things were coming to mind that were taking me out of the experience, definitely. So that's my overall reaction to it. And then the one thing I'll say too about the trailer, one of the problems for me was you knew from the trailer that the kid was going to survive. The whole journey of the trailer was like, all these other kids haven't survived, but they, through the black phone and through these apparitions, they prepare him to get through that. So I'm thinking maybe if I hadn't seen the trailer, maybe, and I didn't know the kid was going to survive, maybe, you kind of always know the kid's going to survive. That would be really dark if they went through that movie and then he just gets whacked at the end. But I think maybe that's part of what took away something of the movie for me. I don't know, Jen, what did you think?
I completely agree. The trailer, I felt, gave away so many details. Although I loved Ethan Hawke and thought he was extremely creepy, just like when he was in Moon Knight. Love him now. I felt like his character was not a surprise. Like, nothing was that surprising that I felt like I watched because I saw so much in the trailer, unfortunately. I did like it. I thought it did a lot of things well, and I agree with Ron. I had some mixed feelings about a few elements too, but overall it was good.
Yeah, I will say I kept waiting for there to be some kind of greater reveal or payoff because they were setting up a lot of things. And and it was definitely intentional that they didn't explain a whole lot, but I kept almost wondering if there was going to be some greater twist or like supernatural being pulling the strings behind the scenes or something, and there is kind of a twist, and it's just not as major or significant as you might think, and yeah, you did see so much of the movie in the trailer. I was almost I kept waiting, like, is there going to be some section of the movie we haven't seen? But yeah, I do think they showed too much in the trailer because it would pretty much cover the entire movie. So yeah, it wasn't a super big surprise, but I did like, I thought the tension and the atmosphere kind of made up for it.
Yeah, tension and atmosphere was really good. I thought all of the period details were good. And, you know, especially when they switched into that, I don't know the film term, but that more like sort of squishy lens view was really retro. I think sort of when Gwen was seeing the visions.
Right, yeah, the
dreams
or the vision sequences, yeah.
That stuff was all really good. What else? I mean, yeah, obviously Ethan Hawke was great. I thought both Finney and Gwen, the actors who played them, were fantastic.
I really liked the relationship that the siblings had because so many times movies or TV shows just have like siblings who are constantly bickering or teasing each other, and I really like that they still kind of had that relationship, but it was a lot deeper, and they cared for each other, and they had obviously a really rough household that they were coming from, so they kind of looked out for each other and checked up on each other, and so that made the separation. The one thing that really stood out to me is when Finney is captured and in the basement, it just feels like it's a totally different world. The events on the outside, the police and everybody looking for him, feel completely detached, and he falls asleep a bunch. I don't know if he falls asleep at night or if certain scenes happen at night and during the day, but it seems like the timelines almost don't even match up.
Right.
So it just adds this kind of like surreal quality to the time that he's in the basement and locked up, and you're not sure what time it is or how long he's been in there or where he is and what lies beyond the door and everything else. So the kind of the way they revealed all of that eventually towards the end of the movie, I thought was pretty clever.
I also really liked how the police officers took the little girl, I'm sorry, what's her name, Gwen's vision seriously.
Oh yeah,
and
yeah.
She was telling them, and they were trying to track down the house when she had the vision of the door. And I just thought, like, usually in, you know, horror movies and stuff like that, nobody believes the kids, and nobody's going to believe the psychic kid. You know what I mean?
And
like,
the way she went off on the cop when they first interviewed her, so you think I killed him,
right?
Yeah.
That
At the beginning,
hilarious.
that was perfect.
That was fantastic.
So I really liked how the cops actually did take her seriously. Although her father, his character, ugh.
Yeah.
I mean, the guy who played him did a very good job, but hated him.
Yeah, no, he was awful. Yeah, I thought the performances were great all around. Ethan Hawke, I really liked how they hinted at this much greater, like, both psychological issues and, like, kind of his backstory, and they hinted at, you know, what he does to the kids that he kidnaps, but they never actually show it. But I really liked how, like, every time he goes in and out of the room, he kind of, like, says some weird cryptic things like, oh, it's not going right this time, or something is different this time, and you almost feel like there might be some great, like, again, there's that kind of feeling as if some greater supernatural thing is at work, or he knows, or like he's part of some
kind of ESP
cult or something, right? And so I like that, and I also liked how each time he appeared, he had like almost a different, I think it was a different mask, and sometimes it was just like the top of the mask, and sometimes it was the bottom, sometimes it had a face, and sometimes it was just blank and everything else. So that to me hinted at some sort of greater psychology that he was going through, but they obviously never really explained it, so it kind of leaves it up to interpretation, which I thought was cool.
Those things that he talked about and his seeming awareness but not awareness of the phone, just that hint that there was some kind of connection, and again, maybe it was intentional and they just, you know, they wanted to deal with what they dealt with in the plot and not take it too far. But obviously Gwen's capabilities and what was going on with her mom and what happened with her mom is why supposedly the dad was such a tool. It seemed like there was going to be some kind of reveal or connection or greater story there that just never came about. And when the final battle happened, you know, so to speak, like there was a lot of things that happened when he dug the hole and Ethan Hawke fell in the hole. At one point he pulled his mask off, and like that was like he had this crazy reaction. He didn't want the kid to see him without his mask, but clearly he was going out, you know, without his mask on. So and then when his poor brother came down, as soon as his brother opened the door and found Finney and was like, I knew it, god damn it, and then he didn't say, let's get out of here right away. I'm like,
right, yeah,
he's dead. He's gonna get axed in the head
in 2 seconds. Yeah,
in 2 seconds. So there was kind of that part to it as well. Just to tick through some of the things that were things that I felt that pulled me out of the movie as I was watching it. The level of violence among the kids, and just that whole idea, like, it's the 70s, it's latchkey kids that, were out and could run around free and play, and it's not, so different than it is today. And, Jen and I grew up in some of that element, and, we all got in fights, we got picked on, bullied. I just felt like they amped up and I'm sure violence did and does happen to this degree in some place, but for this little suburban town in Denver, it just seemed like kids pulling knives on each other and just kicking the living shit out of each other like it was a martial arts movie. I just felt was kind of a little over the top, and almost, maybe it was supposed to be juxtaposed with the real horror of the grabber, with the bad things that just kids do to each other. I don't know that, I've seen that. We've seen anything from A Christmas Story to, how many movies deal with bullies and people beating each other up. And I don't know, to me, that just, from my growing up experience in a time close to that, I just was like, I don't know. But also just the way the grabber operated in his black van with his giant pile of balloons, dressed up like this magician with a big top hat and a cape and all this stuff on. Yes, these were latchkey kids, and back in the day, the kids everyone walked home from school on their own, but there was also lots of stay-at-home moms back then. It stretched believability for me that, like, every place the grabber ran out and jumped somebody I'm like, nobody saw anything. And especially after, we were saying this as we were watching it, 3, 4, 5, 6 kids get taken in this one little small town.
And nobody
saw anything.
And nobody's walking their kids to school or...
Well, that's what made me think it might have been something supernatural, that he was like...
Right.
It might have been something. But then
that
it
almost would
wasn't,
have, that almost would have helped. I don't want to, harp on the... Every movie asks you to suspend disbelief for certain things, and some things in every movie that you watch or show, there's things that work for you in terms of suspension of disbelief, but you can be sitting next to somebody who says, oh, that's ridiculous, that would never happen. So, those were just some things for me that kind of just pulled me out of the experience as we were watching it. But like I said, overall, I thought it was very, very effective, very, obviously, production quality, for not a high budget movie. Fantastic production quality. Scott Derrickson's obviously very good. And I think that's all my thoughts that I can think of. Anything else you want to touch on, Cam or Jen?
I kind of speculated for a little while that Finney had the same type of powers that Gwen did, or something similar, because how was he able to talk to the kids that were dead on the phone and see them? Which, again, I think that was supposed to be something that was a little... They shouldn't have revealed so much in the trailer on that either, because we knew that they were going to call and help him out of the situation. Right. But I wondered if, maybe because it's his mom too, that maybe some of that rubbed off on him. And I also found it interesting that the kids were kind of troublemaker type of kids that the grabber got. And I'm wondering if, he's patrolling the streets and he must have somehow been stalking them, watching them, and I'm wondering if almost they could have put like a scene, maybe you saw the black van in the background when he was, the kids were beating the shit out of each other, or something was going on, maybe to see why he grabbed the kids that he did. What was his method? There was just not a lot about him. But
obviously Finney didn't fit that role. Yeah. And then the other thing too of okay, they were all these kids that were kicking the crap out of people, or that were athletes, and Finney was clearly more of kind of the, high stereotypical wimpy kid. Granted, he had help, but that was a little strange. So there was just a lot of things that made me pulled me out of the story a little bit. But what other thoughts? That was a good one. I hadn't even thought of that.
Yeah, I don't really have any other thoughts. I was pretty happy. It was pretty simple, aside from the kind of interesting twists that they did on the typical kind of kidnapper slasher kind of formula. It was a pretty simple story, so I just thought it mostly worked for me, and I just loved Ethan Hawke's performance.
Overall performances were great overall. The movie as a total package, I think, was definitely a thumbs up for me.
Worth watching, yeah.
Thumbs up, worth watching, but not without some reservations. So I guess that's a wrap on the Black Phone, and we are excited to have another episode actually coming up fairly quickly. We're going to cover Nope, the new Jordan Peele UFO horror film. Excited to speak about that one. And then Cam and I are going to do something a little different on the heels of that, in that we're going to talk about some alien movies and just kind of a look back on some favorite alien movies inspired by our viewing of Nope. So that's what's coming up next for us. Obviously, there's a ton of exciting stuff. If you like what you hear, please, wherever you're listening to us, like, subscribe, leave a comment. As I said, Cam and I post our links to the episode on Twitter, so if you want to leave a comment for us there, we always enjoy just having these conversations with you all, whoever all is out there, and we hope you do too. So thanks for listening.